Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means and that's Stefan Krajisnik, and this is your Monday pod. It is not a Leave No Doubt pod, though. Though, I mean, given the subject matter, it might be a Leave No Doubt pod. I guess we'll see, because it's not necessarily what they did on the field, but it's what they're doing in the front offices, because the transfer portal is open. It opened last Monday, and it is open until Friday, which I think this is lost on people. It's just because it closes on Friday doesn't mean teams can be done adding players on Friday. It just means that the players that they can add will not be added to after Friday. Once you're in, but like you can't, like if USC wants to add Jimmy Crickets to its team in 2 weeks, if Jimmy Crickets is already in the portal by Friday, then they can add Jimmy Crickets in 2 weeks. And that, granted, that depends on what USC's like semester or quarter schedule is like. All those things play in the, so like don't think that, okay, Ohio State only has 2 weeks to add people by the portal standards. They only have 2 weeks to add people by the I don't even know when Ohio State starts classes. But listen, again, Cardinal Jones said it. They're not here to play school. They're here to make money and to play college football. So here's the point of today's pod. Maybe it does fall under the Leave No Doubt idea. We are here to provide context to everything that is going on with Ohio State right now, whether that be losses in the portal, additions in the portal, what's going on upstairs with some of the decisions that Ross Bjork has made in terms of some multimedia deals and everything else, because I think there is a lot going on. And I don't think as a fan, you don't know whether you should be freaking out about this, whether you should be excited about this, whether you should even care about any of that. So this is going to be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour of just providing overall context into why and what is happening in the Ohio State football sphere since the season ended and since the transfer portal opened. We are going to start with the portal side of things because of the amount of attrition Ohio State has seen through the transfer portal through the first week of it. They lost 26 players, Stefan, from the moment the portal was open. At the time we are recording this podcast at 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening, they have lost 26 players. That number could go up by the time you hear this Monday or whatever time throughout the week. How should fans feel about the number of people Ohio State has already lost to the portal, Stefan?
I mean, it's fair to feel uneasy. I think that's a large number. That's a lot of guys to lose who, have had at least 1 year in the program and kind of understand how, things at Ohio State work and how, the development track that they're on and all that comes with that. So it's fair to feel uneasy. But at the same time, I think this is it's kind of the first time we're seeing it to this level at Ohio State, like this high of a number in terms of players leaving. And, obviously we'll see over the course of the next couple of weeks, players coming in and all that. But this is kind of what college football is now, right? Like you really can't view a roster anymore from like a big picture perspective. Like it's year by year. Your players for 1 year might be a totally different group of players the next year, right? So it's like it's 1 year rentals, it feels like, with rosters, right? Even if the guys that are sticking around or that you recruited, kind of feel like 1 year rentals because they can enter the portal, and the guys you brought in through the portal obviously also kind of view them as 1 year rentals. So it's just the state of college football, and I think Ohio State did a good job of maintaining the way it builds rosters, the last few years, as schools like, Ole Miss and Indiana are probably the most noteworthy examples of just like overhauling rosters year after year through the transfer portal. Ohio State and Georgia kind of did a good job of sticking with what they normally do in terms of, building off high school and just using the portal to either, fill a need or get a player like a Caleb Downs or Quinshon Judkins that's like, hey, if he's available, why would you not add him to the roster? And it no longer feels that way for Ohio State, right? Like they've kind of, or I guess I should say college football has kind of caught up with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ways of college football have kind of caught up with them. And I don't think, 25 is a scary number, obviously, but it's kind of close to the norm, really, of what we see in the sport. Maybe a little higher, but it's kind of what college football is now. And I think it's time I think we're seeing Ohio State kind of adjust to that, and it's catching up to them.
And it's 26 in terms of what we would have called like traditional scholarship people before they raised the number to 105 and everybody was on scholarship. You also added Mason Maggs and Isaiah Kema, a quarterback and offensive lineman here in the portal. But like when I said the 26 number is just the people where, if we're living in the traditional world of the 85 scholarship players, of those players, those who are in the portal. So essentially, Stefan, I view this as this has been happening to the rest of college football, and now it's happening to the old rich people in college football. And so you're almost freaking out about it because you spent 5 years not having to deal with it to this extent, right? I think often when Ohio State lost people to the portal, it had been people who were so buried on the depth chart that it was kind of like, all right, well, that guy was never going to play here anyway. It's still that same logic, but instead of it being a guy who's maybe third or fourth in his position group, it's depth pieces who weren't even here that long, right? And we're living in this world where college football for a long time is you got to know these kids as recruits. You watched Ohio State battle for the kids. You watched Ohio State win the recruiting battle for the kid. And then 12 months after he gets here, he's gone. I can understand the need to want to freak out about that. So here's the question I'll ask, because I think when you see 5-star Aaron Scott's leaving, it's like, okay, Ohio State's losing a 5-star recruit. 5-star Mylan Graham is leaving. Oh no, Ohio State's losing a 5-star recruit. 4-star Bryce West. Oh no, Ohio State's losing a top 80 recruit who's from Ohio. What the heck is going on here? These are now names where if you're the average fan, you probably looked and said, this is our future. These guys, there was a plan for them to play for us one day, and they are leaving. This is way, way, way more people. It's like if you lost Jamison Williams in 2020, but then you also lost like 3 other people who fit that, like, oh, Jamison Williams is leaving because he's not a starter, but he's like number 4. We kind of need that depth. Is there a guy from those 26 to where, as this was happening over the last week, even if, as we're sitting here doing this pod, maybe we've all calmed down and had cooler heads about this. In the moment when Ohio State lost this guy, you were like, that's maybe there's a little more happening here. It's like, okay, if you were a fan, now you have like real true concern for what's actually happening in the program.
Let me say this too real quick, because I was talking about the 25 number. I was just looking at some of these, transfer portal team rankings, and you can see how many guys are coming and going. It's like, obviously, the programs that have had coaching changes, I think Penn State's got like 47 guys who have entered the portal. Like, places that have had coaching changes make sense, but it's like, I think Texas has 25 guys transferring out. I'm looking on the list here. Yeah, Texas has 25. Oklahoma has 27. Mississippi State has 33. South Carolina has 17. Like, these are all, Illinois has 28, right? So, like, the 25 number, although it feels high, it's kind of, on par with some other programs that aren't even going through coaching changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one... Look, there's 2 that kind of strike me. Obviously, the situation with the cornerbacks, especially Aaron Scott, was surprising because it kind of felt like maybe that was a guy who could push for a starting spot, and Bryce West kind of falls. It felt like the 2 of them could factor into the conversation, whether it's Bryce West just being your nickel or Jermaine slotting in and Aaron Scott getting to play outside. Right? It felt like those 2 guys had a real shot of competing for a starting spot and getting a starting spot. So to see them leave was kind of surprising. The Quincy Porter one just struck with me a little bit because I think they're fine, right? Like, we've seen them already go out in the portal and get a receiver. Chris Henry Jr. is coming in, like Jeremiah's coming back, Brandon Ennis is coming back, like we know that. So the Quincy Porter stuff didn't necessarily catch me by surprise in the sense of, okay, I think they'll be fine at the position next year. Like, obviously I think you and I and Andrew probably as well had high expectations of what he could do, and he showed flashes of it this season, but it's not like 2026 receivers room is something to scoff at just because Quincy Porter left. But it kind of was maybe hey, Brian Hartline, what he was doing with that position group, and not just not bringing guys in from the portal, but he also wasn't losing a ton of guys to the portal. That was maybe one of those reminders of like, okay, it's the receiver room is going through a bit of change, right? Things are about to be a little bit different in the receiver room, at least until Cortez Hankton kind of establishes himself at Ohio State and kind of gets the thing rolling and gets his type of players in there and whatnot. The Quincy thing was just like, okay, a little bit of a changing of the guard at wide receiver, right? And the approach that Ohio State's going to have at that position. That's the one that maybe stuck with me the most in terms of like big picture approach. You're just like, okay, like this is how this is going to be now. But the cornerbacks, Bryce and Aaron Scott, are the ones that stuck with me in the sense of like, oh, okay, I thought those guys would stick around and compete for a starting spot, and they decided to go elsewhere.
The way you felt about the corners is how I felt about Fahim Delane, which happened Saturday evening. Just because I think the Fahim Delane one was the first one where it was like, I know we think that Aaron Scott could have stayed and competed for a job, but there's Devin Sanchez is still here. Mm-hmm. Jermaine Matthews is still here. So it's a, can you beat somebody out for the job who's already ahead of you? With Fahim Delane, I felt like there was a big red spot on one of the starting safety spots with his name on it. And so for him to hop in the portal, I literally said this to our texter, 614-350-3315. Either maybe something's not clicking there and you've already identified somebody in the portal who's going to have that spot. And maybe Fahim Delane looked at that and received that information, said, okay, well, my road to the field isn't as clear as maybe it was, I don't know, 6 months ago after I'd gone through spring practice. And I thought, okay, I'm going to sit and learn behind Jalen McClain and Caleb Downs for a year. And then in 2026, I'm going to be playing alongside Jalen McClain. Well, now I don't know if that's true. Maybe I should find somewhere else to go. Or Blaine Bradford. In comparison to how Devin Sanchez kind of jumped Bryce West and Aaron Scott, Blaine Bradford really is that guy. And he's not been on campus long, like the early enrollees just got here, but there's a very clear, I'm going to be a dude here as a true freshman. And then there's the other side of it, right, that a lot of our texters even pointed out, or maybe just somebody offered him more money and he wants to go take that money and Ohio State didn't want to give it to him, which is every recruit, every single player now, right? There's always that idea of that. But from a strictly football standpoint, Leroy Roker played 8 games and played 82 snaps. And when they needed to go to another safety after Lorenzo Styles went down and they went with that dime look, it was Leroy Roker who came into the game and not Fahim Delane. Fahim Delane played 8 games and 81 snaps this year. So just one more snap for Leroy Roker. But I didn't think Leroy Roker played in that game because he's like significantly better than Fahim Delane. I think he's ahead of Fahim Delane because one was a true freshman and one wasn't. And that's kind of normal to happen. But I felt like that second year off season is where you see guys who have Fahim Delane's kind of makeup, a highly rated recruit. That's where you see them make that jump. I mean, we just saw it with Jalen McClain a year ago where he made a similar jump, right? So, I mean, we saw it with Carnell Tate. We saw it with Julian Sands, second-year starter, right? We've seen this is not new. Highly rated recruit year one, he's on special teams and maybe he has a small role. And then in year two, he's competing to be a starter here. That's not a new concept here. I mean, Riley Pettijohn might be actively doing that at linebacker. He says with caution because he'll get excited about a player, and then the next thing you know, that player is in the portal. Whew, it's a lot happening. But I just thought that with Fahim Delane, in the moment, I was like, huh? And I don't think Ohio State would have loved losing that guy. Are they okay with it? Maybe. I guess we'll see what they do in the portal this week and over the next couple of weeks. But I thought that one, of the guys they lost, I was ready to pencil in as a 2026 starter. And now that is not the case. And even as they add Earl Little from Florida State as a guy who can do some safety stuff, but then can also do some nickel stuff, there's some Jordan Hancock to him. I don't know if that still solves the, I think he more replaces Lorenzo Styles than he does Caleb Downs in terms of starting. I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be as good as Caleb Downs. If you're looking for them to replace Caleb Downs, you're not going to find that guy in college football. You might not even find that guy in the NFL. Let's see what Caleb does next year. But I felt like in terms of the structural of this defense, Earl Little might end up being their nickel. And so they still don't have a starting safety. And I thought that would be Fahim Delane, especially with Malik Hartford off and gone. And maybe that's not the case. And I'm like, okay, that's a little off for me.
Yeah, that one did catch me by surprise on Saturday as well. The Aaron Scott one, it doesn't surprise you in the sense of it's very hard now to keep guys around and have them go into a third season. Yeah. And not know if they're going to be a starter, right? That's for going into the 2026 season, 2024 recruiting class. It's kind of tough to keep guys around from that class if they're not guaranteed starting spots. And I get that from their perspective as well. But it is surprising for a guy who's on that track, who looks like he's going to be a starter for you, who's young. Aaron Scott was forced because of what they had at the position. Aaron Scott was kind of forced to move down the depth chart in a year where he was supposed to move up the depth chart.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case for Fahim Delane. That's what's kind of surprising there. Is he was moving up the depth chart. He was going in the direction that you thought he was going to go going into year two, and that's not the case. But then, like you said, it's not the same just because he's more of a Lorenzo replacement than a Fahim or a Caleb replacement. But you go out and you got older, right? You got someone with experience, someone who's an all ACC player to come in and this wasn't kind of a direct player for player swap because they're not exactly the same type of player, but you're still bringing in a guy who's got experience. And this is kind of what roster building is now, right? Where you'd rather have a guy who's, going into his 4th or 5th season of college football, who's got, all ACC level experience. You'd rather have that than a guy you project to start, right? Or to develop and start going into year 2 in college football. So it's the reality of it.
If they weren't paying players, do you think you'd have that same sentiment?
Probably not, because I think the payments are kind of what makes this such a year after year thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I think if the transfer portal was just the transfer portal and you didn't have NIL kind of part of this whole thing, I don't think you would see so many players enter, right? Because there's a lot of players. The reason they're entering is financial reasons. It's not just playing
Mm-hmm.
time. So probably not, because I would just say if the portal wasn't as loaded because there was no NIL and things like that, then I'd be saying this isn't a very good, healthy approach to go year after year, see what your roster brings you. I think you can do that now.
I think so. Here's the deal from Ohio State's perspective, and I don't think it's illogical. I'm not going to pay you the type of money to do a job that I don't think you're going to be doing. I'm not going to pay you like a starter if I'm not 100% sure you're a starter. And there's a lot of guys that you can apply that to who have left Ohio State. They would have loved to keep them as depth pieces and go fight for a job. In fact, I think had we not gotten rid of the spring portal window, I think some of these guys maybe would have stuck around at least through the spring, right? And tried to fight and keep that job. But we don't have that window. And so you can't afford to, it's always great to bet on yourself, but you have to do so logically and with like the necessary information, because what you can't have is, you bet on yourself, you lose, and now you're stuck here for another 12 months. So that's both perspectives of it, of like why a kid who is heading into his third year can't stick around through the spring to see if he's going to win a job or not. But it's also understandable why Ohio State or Georgia or Texas or anybody else would be looking at that kid and going, I can't pay you because I think you're going to be a starter. Because what if you're not? A prime example of that, Ethan Inyah was going to be the prime example for that for Ohio State for a long time here. They gave him the level of money because they thought he'd be their starting left tackle. He wasn't their starting left tackle. He wasn't their starting right tackle. He wasn't their starting left or right guard. He wasn't even the next guy up when they needed to go to another guard. He wasn't even the next guy up when it's time to get to another guard. So I don't know if you're looking at this financially, do you feel like as Ohio State, you wasted $1 million? Probably. Does it impact the way you go about things in the future? Most definitely, because you can't afford that to happen, which leads us into the third part of this idea of, I don't think Indiana wants to live in this world forever. In fact, when we talked with Kirk Cignetti before the Big Ten Championship game, Stefan, on that Zoom call, he said as much, right? He would like to get out of the portal world and recruit, but he's trying to get through this window, and he's doing it at a place that has historically been a bad college football program. So maybe he has to stay in this window maybe longer than if he had gone to, Auburn or Arizona State or something like that, right? If he had gone to one of those schools who at least had some level of like relevancy over the past 25 years. But what he does not want is like potential, because it doesn't get you anything. Production over potential has become like the key phrase right now. And to be frank about it, that's what the NFL is. They don't care about the idea of what you might be. It's what are you doing for me right now? Because if you're not, we're going to go find somebody else who is doing this. The only position that gets to thrive off of potential is quarterback. And that's because you put so much capital into them that you have to rely on that potential sometimes. But is Indiana and the success they've had over the last 2 years, where they lost 2 games, and there was the 2 teams who played in the 2024 national championship game, and they are old. It's not a bunch of guys who are highly recruited guys. It's a bunch of guys who are proven. How much do you think that is playing an impact into why Ohio State is approaching this versus this is also just a circumstance of where college football is today, where you have to do things like this if you want to succeed?
Yeah, I think Indiana does impact it a little bit from Ohio State's perspective, because you're always striving to get better. When a team beats you, you can kind of look at, okay, what did they do that we didn't do? And you look at all the places where Indiana had veteran players that they got from the transfer portal, guys who were proven and maybe had some advantages, right? So and I think Indiana, because I think I said this last week on one of the pods, like going into the Rose Bowl, I thought it was really stupid, frankly, that some people were picking Alabama to win and their, logic was talent. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if we pick the 22 best players on the field at the Rose Bowl, how many of them are Indiana players, right? And you could say that, like, Ohio State, I'm trying to think, like, Ohio State was really good, and I guess the secondary would probably be the position I would point to, where it's just like Ohio State's got highly rated guys. D'Angelo Ponz is probably the best corner in that game. You know what I'm saying? Like,
easily.
Right. And you look at like what Keelan Black and Roman Hemby are doing in the backfield for Indiana. It's like their running game was better than Ohio State's, and is better than Ohio State. So it's like, what do I care if there's a bunch of 5-stars on one side if the other side is better, if they're producing at a higher level, right? Like, you could say that about Indiana's offensive line, the way they've played against Oregon and against Alabama, and I think they did an okay job holding up against Ohio State, right? It's like, sure, you might have 4 and 5 stars in the trenches, but their guys are better. Their center is like been around college football, like knows things. Like Pat Coogan has seen a lot of things, right? So it's like I think the impact Indiana would have is just what you were pointing to there, production over potential, where it's like it's no longer his position of need. It's if there's a guy that's been around and he can help you, then you go out and get that guy. And I think one thing too that Indiana's done, and this is more of a result of Cignetti coming over as a new coach and bringing players from JMU, but it's also like the guys that they got from the portal, a lot of them weren't 1-year rentals, right? Like they're guys that have been in Indiana a couple of years now. You look at Surratt, you look at you look at Aiden Fisher, like guys like that have had done a lot for you. Ohio State's done that obviously with Caleb Downs, with Davison Igbinosin. That's another thing too of going into the portal, getting guys, but also trying to get guys who can give you a couple seasons. I think goes a long way. So I think Indiana's approach to the portal has been, kind of the way that's a good way of doing it. Like you said, I don't think Cignetti wants to do that forever, but we'll see how many players they lose. But they're making some splashy moves in the portal right now. They've added 11 guys, and I don't know how many more. And they've only had one guy out so far. Obviously, they're still playing, so it's like we'll see when the national championship game ends. How many people in Indiana ends up losing to the portal, and they've got, like I said, some veteran guys who are going to leave just either to the NFL or due to eligibility. But they've leaned on the portal when they've needed to this offseason and positions of need and things of that nature. And they're doing it with veteran guys. And I think that's something that Ohio State's probably looking at and saying potential is great, 5-star is great, but isn't an all ACC player better than a 5-star player who hasn't played yet?
It's an idea. And listen, recruiting they've always been ideas. It's just if you get 3 5-stars a year and then you round up your roster and you got 15 of them on your roster, the chances of you being very good, sure. Because more often than not, those ideas do hit. But in a world where those ideas are being spread out towards more teams, the idea doesn't matter anymore, right? It's being a 5-star just means if you hit, you are going to be so much better than everybody else. But I think sometimes we forget the if you hit part of that equation, right? For every Jackson Smith-Njigba who was a 5-star recruit who did hit, there's Julian Fleming, who probably in hindsight wasn't a 5-star recruit. He was not a 5-star recruit who turned into a 5-star player. Cam Coleman, who is now at Texas. I don't know, like Cam Coleman's been productive, but has he been the only receiver in my recruiting class that was better than me? Was Jeremiah Smith productive? Probably not, right? But he's an idea. And so the idea doesn't matter after 2 years in a program. And I think it's shaping roster construction in terms of how many recruits you bring in versus how many portal guys you bring in, because you can only afford to have so many people in your roster where your answer is, man, if that guy turns into something, right? I think Jelani Thurman is that. You look at Jelani Thurman and like the idea of Jelani Thurman is awesome. He's going to North Carolina. The idea of James Peoples is going to Penn State. So that's actually a pretty good trade-off there. The idea of trying to think of Bryson Rogers when he got here was great. He's going to South Florida, right? Sam Dixon's going to South Carolina, which is a pretty good pickup by South Carolina. I think the fact that the Ohio State lost 2 running backs to the portal and they both ended up at Big Ten and SEC schools, that just means the running back room was pretty quality in 2024 from a talent standpoint. Now, granted, both of those guys have to go to their schools and do something, because just because you transfer somewhere else doesn't mean you're going to turn into anything. All these guys right now, they're ideas until they turn into something. Earl Little is not an idea. D'Angelo Ponge wasn't an idea. John Walker's not an idea. Devin McEwen isn't an idea. Christian Allegrio is not an idea. These guys have played and they are proven commodities. So, and if that's what it takes to win a national championship, then that's what Ohio State is going to do versus another year of a guy who 3 years ago had a lot of upside and is coming into year 3 and has not turned that upside into anything tangible. And so that's why I think for me, even the Fahim Delane one, again, it's confusing because I felt like there was an opportunity for him. But when you look at it from the perspective of, sure, Ohio State lost a 5-star recruit. Is he a 5-star player now? Probably not. The one thing I love about the portal is they do the rankings again. And again, rankings they're all subjective conversations. But there are guys where they'll show, oh, this guy was a 5-star recruit as a high school player. He's like a 3-star player now. Quinshon Judkins is a prime example of this. Quinshon Judkins wasn't some highly rated dude when he got to Ole Miss. I bet everybody wanted him last year when he hopped in the transfer portal, though, right? So it's production over potential, and that's what's happening right now. Even if it feels like Ohio State is losing a lot of guys that, as a fan, you've probably invested a lot of emotional capital into them, and so to not be a part of the payoff of that, I understand if there's a level of frustration in that. Any other thoughts on just the roster and on what's happening in general for you?
Yeah, I was going to say, too, I think one thing that's interesting is we're not seeing a ton, though, of movement with Ohio State along the offensive line, right? I think there's some, a couple, you mentioned Kemba entering the portal, Tegra obviously entered the portal. I think Tegra entering the portal is probably just a result of, the way things ended last season, and probably just better to go that direction. But, like, Ohio State remains pretty solid in terms of recruiting and developing on the offensive line, right? Like, Ethan Onyawa, he's going to become the example now of, like, transfers that don't work out, but also Ohio State ended up being, I know the offensive line didn't play great at the end of the year, but was largely fine on the offensive line with guys that they developed and recruit, and that's what they're going to continue doing. And I think we're seeing that now where, we've had some texters be like, when are we going to get an offensive tackle, like an offensive lineman in the portal? And I'm like, I just don't really think that's a position of need. And I think that's the only position where Ohio State would really like to not have to lean on the portal, and get guys from the portal, and they're okay there, right? So if, like, sure, losing a safety sucks, but also if you think that safety is a position that you can lean on the portal on, then so be it, right? If that's what you think of that position, then I'm fine with you using the portal for that position. If you think offensive line is somewhere where you still need to recruit and develop, and you're having to lean on the portal, that's where maybe there's some problems. But this is their approach on the offensive line, and that approach is still working. Because I look like Indiana, again, another example. Four of their 5 starting offensive linemen, like, were Indiana recruits, right? They weren't portal guys. Coogan is the exception, and obviously he's maybe their best. Carter Smith's probably their best offensive lineman, but Coogan's pretty good too, and he's a transfer, so it kind of stands out. But it's like, no, most of this offensive line is built off of recruitment, right? Even in a place like Indiana, most of that is built off recruitment. So that is the one. Like, if you're looking for a silver lining of, like, holy crap, my team's losing 25 players, how should I feel about this? Well, the position where they don't really want to lean on the portal, they're not having to lean on the portal. I think that's a good thing. Everywhere else, I think you can kind of go in and find guys to fill. Quarterback's probably the other one where I think Ryan Day would prefer to recruit and develop a quarterback. Obviously, Will Howard won this team a natty, and I think if he needs to, he'll obviously go out and get a quarterback. But I think quarterback and offensive line are kind of the two where this program views it and says, I would rather recruit and develop than lean on the portal. Well, they're not necessarily losing guy. Like Tavian St. Clair's was recruited and being developed, right? He didn't jump into the portal. Offensive linemen are not, hopping into the portal from this Ohio State team. So those two positions, if you're keeping that intact and leaning on recruiting and developing, then I can work with that, right? Because the positions where you can lean on the portal, you will if you need to.
And notice you didn't say wide receiver.
But let's be honest.
No, well,
Nick Morris was just in the portal. Cam Coleman was just in the portal.
Right.
Both of those guys have produced at the collegiate level at a higher level than Quincy Porter did.
Yeah.
So, like, why would I, you know what I'm saying? Like, why obviously Ohio State went out and the transfer receiver that they did get, McEwen, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a UTSA guy, so maybe not the flashiest thing, but, like, he's produced more than some of the guys who have left. Like, he's produced more than Bryson Rogers has. Like, he's proven it to you more than Bryson Rogers has. I think frankly, I think receiver is a position that you really can lean on the portal. There's some really good receivers that are in the portal every year.
It's just funny that I don't know if you would have said that 6 months ago and not gotten laughed off of the pod for it. But this is how things change going forward. And in fact, I do think there is a world where we still think that it's one of the places where they don't have to lean on it. If when JJ and Carnell went down, we saw more from Mylan Graham this year, right? If Quincy Porter hadn't been dealing with an injury, that's also going to, like, keep him out for a good chunk of spring. And Quincy Porter still hasn't fallen to home yet, right? Jamie French just committed to Michigan. So I do wonder how that impacts maybe whether or not they go after Quincy Porter as well. When you've already got Andrew Marsh and Jamie French, do they go after Quincy, right? Because that's the other side of this coin is just because you hop in the portal doesn't mean you're going to find a new home. Right, everybody who opts in the portal isn't Jameson Williams, where you land in Alabama and you still turn into a first-round draft pick. That's not everybody's story here, right? There's never going to be Caleb Downs in the portal. That was a unique circumstance. If Nick Saban doesn't retire, Caleb Downs is an Alabama Crimson Tide for 3 years, and then he's off to the NFL. So that if you're looking for the next Caleb, that's not going to be in the portal. Jeremiah Smith's not going to be in the portal. Will Campbell's of the world, who's a left tackle at LSU and ends up being a first-round draft pick, that guy's not going to be in the portal either. I just think it's interesting with wide receiver had we seen a more productive, 3 or 4 weeks there when Ohio State wasn't healthy at receiver from some of these guys, I don't think we're having this conversation right now about wide receiver not being amongst that bunch. I will ask you this, though, because you brought up quarterback. I tend to agree with you, but I don't know. Ohio State won with a transfer quarterback who was an old guy last year. Indiana or Miami is going to win with an old guy at quarterback next. I think it was very obvious that Julian Sand was the youngest quarterback in the playoff this year. And I think it showed up in the last 2 games. Good news is he's going to get better because we have to remember these were games 13 and 14 for him as a starter. While for Fernando Mendoza and Carson Beck, those are games like 30 and 35 or whatnot for both of those guys. You have to remember Fernando Mendoza is in his 4th year of college football, and I think his 3rd year as a starter. And Carson Beck is in his 3rd year as a starter and his like 6th year. Like Carson Beck is the same age as CJ Stroud. Somebody had a stat that said Carson Beck, when he got to college, Malachi Toney was 11 years old or something like that when Carson Beck first got to college. Like, that's what we're talking about here. And so we will get out of this age of super seniors. I think Carson Beck is amongst the last of those people who got the COVID year and got to stick around. And like, listen, I feel for Trinidad Chambliss, and then there was another quarterback who got denied, but I kind of think it's a good thing. 24, 25 years old, going up against 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds. It's just like, that's not what this is supposed to be. You're supposed to get 5 years to either create enough value that you're an NFL player or you move on with your life. We got to get back to that with college sports. We can't be having 25-year-olds playing college football because then it's like, oh man, Carson Beck played better than Julian Sand. Yeah, Julian Sand's 19. Carson Beck can rent a car. Like, that's not equal. But I do wonder, though. So Tavian St. Clair's here. I think we all are in agreement that Julian Sand's probably entering his last year of college football. If things go according to plan, he's entering his last year of college football, and then Tavian St. Clair will be the starting quarterback at Ohio State in 2027. I think we are all under that assumption. A lot can change, right? Because 2 years ago was the assumption that Carson Beck was going to be coming out, and now he's at Miami 2 years later. So who knows what might happen there, right? The DJ Uiagalelei went into year 3, and it was like, okay, this might be his last year, and then he came back for another year. And there's plenty of other quarterbacks who have been in that scenario too. So we'll see. But the plan from our perspective is that Tavian St. Clair will be the starter in 2027. I'm not going to be shocked if he's the last quarterback Ohio State recruited at a high school that's the starting quarterback here. Given the way this is going with the movement of players, the fact that we're looking at a 26 recruiting class that just got on campus, and I think we all can look at it and go, if we were running a seminar for a welcome early enrollees, we would go, everybody look to your left, everybody look to your right. Half of you will not be here this time next year. I am out on projecting anything past 24 months in college football. And if you tell me that there is a quarterback right now who is going into his first year as a starter at Central Florida, and in 3 years he's Ohio State starting quarterback, I think I've reached a point where I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting you took that route, saying that Tavian might be the last one. Well, let me give you a scenario where Ohio State loses in the playoff this upcoming year and going into 2027, Tavian St. Clair is a presumed starter. You don't think Ryan Day is going to at least take a look at who's in the portal? If he's not 100%, like, we obviously don't watch practice. If Tavian isn't 100% in practice showing you he's ready to be the starting quarterback, you don't think he's going to just say, do I want to rely on this guy who's never played?
Because what's the difference between Tavian St. Clair and Kyle McCord, right? And to be honest with you, I don't think I'd be shocked if I asked Ryan Day off to the side, hey, man to man, straight up, did you at least think about exploring the portal before the 2025 season based on what you saw from Julian Sand and Lincoln Keenholz? And I think I'd bet like $10 that he would have said yes to me. So I think that's a valid point.
It's hypothetical, of course. We're not reporting anything. But
yeah, these are hypotheticals. And I've never asked Ryan Day. I'm just saying that, like, I think you have to cover all your bases at this point.
Yeah.
And that's what you're like, sure. I think it's easy to say, oh, Tavian St. Clair is up next. Okay, what if Tavian St. Clair goes this season? What if Julian Sand? I don't like projecting injuries on people. Gillis does it, and I hate it. So I just like to say they get abducted by aliens. And Doug used to do that too. If Julian Sand goes missing for 30 minutes of game time against Ball State, and now all of a sudden it's the Tavian St. Clair show. Actually, I'll go even deeper into the season because maybe that's not even fair. I'll say, who's like an October game that they play?
Well,
unfortunately, we don't have the freaking schedule yet, and it's January. Big Ten, what are we doing?
Northwestern.
Yeah, let's just say they play Northwestern on October 15th. And I don't even know if that's a Saturday, but in the middle of October, they're playing Northwestern, and Julian Sand has to leave the game for whatever the reason is. And now for the entire second and third quarter, it's Tavian St. Clair out there. If Tavian St. Clair has in any way the level of production and quality of play that we saw from the receivers this past year when they didn't have JJ and Cardell, you know what we're all going to do? Ohio State's 2027 quarterback is going to be a portal guy. Now, if he goes out there and lights the world on fire, we might overreact the other way and say, hey, is Ryan Day going to pull a Nick Saban at halftime of the Natty and pull Julian Sand for Tavian St. Clair? But that's the world we live in. You got to unturn every stone. So, yeah, I think Tavian St. Clair might be the last. I recruited this guy. I developed this guy. He's a starting quarterback here now. But I also wouldn't be shocked if that we never see that again, simply because, I don't know, can you afford again to go into a playoff where your guy is going into his 14th game as a starter and the other guy is going into his 40th? And by the end of the game, you feel like that was a deciding factor and why one guy made some plays that the other guy didn't make.
Ryan Day always says you can't. What is it? Quarterbacks don't have enough experience, or what I say. Ryan Day always says, and then I literally forget the quote
He
immediately.
says a lot of things, but it's just like you don't know.
It's just like they don't play a lot of football.
They don't.
Kids don't play a lot of 11-on-11 football. And okay, what if there's someone in the portal who's played a lot of 11-on-11 football?
Right.
You don't think that's going to be kind of enticing to him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Could he have gone into the year? Oh, no, actually, that's not a good example. He could not have gone into the year thinking Devin Brown was going to be a starter in 2024. It was too much on the line. But it's also Ohio State. I have had this conversation with somebody, though, because I brought up that idea of heading into the 2025 season. It's going to be a young team. Schedule it's got some checkpoints, but it ain't crazy. Why not just throw Tavian out there and let him figure it out the same way Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence? And the face I got when I asked this person about it, they were like, do you know this is Ohio State, dude? You can't wait. I'm supposed to just waste a year of Jeremiah Smith and Cardell Tate because, hey, JJ, I know you came here to win, but, like, are you okay with the rebuilding year so our quarterback can figure it out? No. What are you talking about, dude? We're not doing that here. Not like quarterback. So, yeah, I there's that. That's all I got from the portal side of things. I know things are crazy. There are additions coming down the road here. Ohio State has been very, very Fort Knox with a lot of this stuff purposefully, because it's part of the negotiation here, right? If people find out Ohio State's looking at a guy, guess what? The agents can now go hike up the price and use it somewhere else. It's the same thing recruiting. It's no different than, if you get an offer from Saban, people think you're pretty good. If you get an offer from Georgia, people think you're pretty good. You get an offer from Texas, people think you're pretty good. You get an offer from Ohio State, people think you're pretty good. So a lot of this stuff has been kind of Fort Knoxy, but I promise you Ohio State's not going to leave the portal cycle with like 4 players. Mainly because they can't leave the portal cycle with 4 players. They don't even have a kicker yet on the roster. So they're going to have a kicker and all those other things. So that's from the football side of things. Ohio State signed a deal last week, and Stefan knows more about that stuff than I do. One, because it's his job to know that stuff more than I do. But 2, I'm not going to say you're interested in it more than I do, but you are more, I'm not saying you're interested in it. You are more interested in it than I am.
Kind of it. I think it's interesting.
Okay, then
I'll take the blame, I guess, for being interested in this kind of stuff.
Well, listen, and this is why this works, right? It's just like, I don't care about that. Well, Stefan does. Well, Stefan doesn't care about that. Well, Stephen does. And that's why this works here. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about some business here on Buckeye Talk.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Steven Means and Stefan Krajisnik trying to talk you off the ledge, or at least tell you how far out on the ledge you should be, and it be reasonable right now.
What's your takeaway from that portal segment? It's just that Ohio State kind of avoided the inevitable for long enough, and now it's just like, hey, this is what college football is now.
Yes, and the quicker you come to terms with that, I think it'll be easier, because what you can't do is every year you freak out about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's this. I guess let me put a bow on it. There is a plan. Whether that plan works or not, we're not going to know until this time next year, right? But there is an approach they are trying to take with this. There are things that are changing in terms of what they think is necessary, in terms of how they pay players, how many players are on the roster, what the roster looks like. There is an NFLization of how Ohio State is approaching its roster building. Whether we think it is the right way to go about it or not, this is what they are going to do. And I was telling Gillis this. Gillis and I and our columnist Jimmy Walker said we went to a Cavs game on Saturday for free, thanks to our company. That's like kind of like, hey, I know the season ended before you wanted to, so here's some tickets to go watch Donovan Mitchell versus Anthony Edwards. It was great. And then Donovan Mitchell forgot how to shoot for the last 4 minutes of the game. It was tough.
Yeah, I was going to ask who won. I was in football mode on Saturday, so I didn't even see it.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, we know. The Cavs won. It was the first 3 quarters were great. I think the fourth quarter it just kind of fell apart, and the Cavs just kind of blew them out after that. But I was telling Gillis this. I don't have an opinion on what Ohio State is doing yet because it's too early to have an opinion. I understand what they are doing. Let's see how it gets applied and whether it has success. Because I think in learning from last year how we all kind of just jumped the gun and decided that Matt Patricia was a stupid hire, turns out it wasn't so stupid. But there were also things where it was like, oh, I thought Ethan Inyala was a smart pickup in the portal. Turns out, not so smart. So I see the plan. I understand why you're approaching the plan this way. You're trying to adapt as much as you can. That's part of the reason why you've been the most recession-proof program of the past 25, 40 years here is because you adapt. I understand what you're adapting to, why you're doing it. And in January next year, whether it's after you're holding up a trophy in Vegas or whatever else you lose, if you don't win a national championship, we will judge it then based off of how they executed the plan. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way of summing it up.
Speaking of plans, who is Learfield? Why is Ohio State in business with him? And why is Ohio State putting jersey patches on their jerseys like this is the NBA? Was that like the best way to ask that question? I was like, if I was going to be a fan about it, like that's the way to do it. Yeah. It's like, why are these things happening? It's stupid.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Let's start with the Learfield part of this. And if you're an Ohio State fan, you've heard their name come up quite a bit actually recently because they work, with some of the NIL stuff now too. But they're a multimedia, company, right? They like a lot of the creative stuff you see, like Ohio State posts, like some of those creative, the video people, the graphics people, like stuff like that. A lot of them actually work for Learfield. Like Learfield's the one who pays them. It's not actually like Ohio State necessarily that pays them. Like Learfield does a lot of the multimedia stuff, and part of that is they are basically in a contract with Ohio State where like they will handle all the sponsorship stuff. Mm-hmm. So instead of Ross Bjork, having to have a bunch of people whose job it is to make sure Raising Cane's has a video board advertisement during a football game or a basketball game, Learfield will kind of handle that. And the way it's typically worked with Ohio State, and the way it works with a lot of schools around the country is I'll say 25 million as the number. That could be way off, but I'll say 25 million as a number. Essentially, there would be a fixed amount where it's like, we're paying you 25 million, you're paying us 25 million, however way it works, go get us sponsorship deals. And really for Learfield, there was not much incentive to make more than 25 million for Ohio State, right? Like you got your money's worth. Like, all right, Ohio State is instead pivoting to doing a revenue-based, deal with them where it's a percentage. The percentage was not made public, but it's a percentage of basically saying, how about instead of saying every year it's going to be 25 mil, why don't I just give you 20% and I keep 80%? And you still keep doing what you're doing, but now there's incentive for Learfield to raise money beyond or sell sponsorships beyond that 25 million. So we're that's the deal that was signed. So Ross Bjork in the story or the interview he did with Sports Business Journal and Ben Portnoy, he talked about, the value in this. Sure, it would have been nice to, put together an agreement and have this big flashy headline about how Ohio State signed, $700 million deal or something like that. Like that's fine, but doing it percentage wise can actually make Ohio State more money. And when you look at the revenue that Ohio State does bring in, in terms of sponsorships compared to schools around the country, they're usually at or near the top in terms of money that they bring in from sponsorships. That would project that on this model, this will be the largest deal of its kind in across college athletics. Ohio State thinks that they can make a lot of money from this. And it's important in the NIL realm for two reasons. Number one is revenue sharing exists now where Ohio State has to pay $20+ million directly to its athletes, or can pay up to that to its athletes, and it's going to. You need more revenue. Like you need more revenue. You're about to give up $20 million every year. You need as much revenue as you can possibly get, right? Because that's a big expense you're adding to your financial report. And we actually on January 15th, is when the annual financial report comes out. And Ross Bjork had told us during the championship celebration for football last season that they think that they're going to be well over $300 million and become the first, athletic department to bring in a revenue of more than $300 million. Sure, revenue goes up, but your expenses just went up $20 million too, right? So you need more revenue. So doing this with Learfield, the sponsorship revenue you bring in is going to be higher than what it was with a fixed amount, right? Like you're projecting that it's going to be worth more than whatever your fixed amount was in your previous deals with Learfield. And I think like with the restructuring, they did like a 3-year extension. I think it's through like 2036 or something like that. Yeah. So there's another 10 years of this. And then the second part of it that's interesting is, I alluded to this earlier, last June when revenue sharing, was passed and we knew that was about to become a thing, Ohio State took its collectives and brought them kind of within the athletic department, the foundation and the society, 1870 society, like they brought them in and they're under this umbrella with I think it's Buckeye Sports Group is what the initiative is called.
Yes.
And that's kind of Learfield overlooking some of that. Learfield can now also, while they sell sponsorships, can kind of, find a way to bring in some more NIL money too. Like your sponsorship, you can say, X amount goes towards, sponsorships, but this amount I want going towards NIL as well. And I don't say this for certain. I think there might be some workarounds where like that doesn't necessarily go in towards the 20.5 million. Like I think this could be kind of just third party NIL. It's just, monitored and kind of, structured through this Buckeye Sports Group. So there's ways. Ohio State, I would imagine, thinks that with this deal with Learfield, if sponsorship goes up, that NIL can also go up and they can have more money to spend on some of these athletes that you're seeing, across sports, but obviously football is the biggest one here. So there's some pretty decent NIL implications in all this. And then in general, just massive revenue implications for Ohio State that is important in an era where your expenses just went up. And, it's 20.5 now. I think we're probably not far from that number going up and going up and going up and go. So like your expenses are only going to get bigger. You need to find new ways to get revenue. And obviously one of those is jersey patches. It's clear that Ohio State, when the NCAA allows it, would like to sell jersey patches. I get it if you're a fan, like that's very irritating. No one wants to see, third and Jeremiah with a big Geico logo on his right shoulder. But also like you want players like Jeremiah Smith? There's gonna be a Geico logo on his shoulder. I don't know if it's gonna be Geico. I'm giving Geico a free ad right now, and I probably shouldn't. But like that's the reality of it. And you need to find new ways to get revenue. The restructuring of this Learfield deal is a way to get more revenue. Selling jersey patches is a way to get new revenue. I think this week is when they vote on allowing the jersey patches or not.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that it's probably going to get passed because, I don't know, you try telling 136 FBS athletic directors that they can't make more money. Let's see how long, let's see how far that gets you. So there's it's money. It's all money, but it all links back to paying the athletes and how you're going to pay the athletes. And there's a way now that Ohio State can more easily obtain the money it needs to pay the 20.5 million revenue sharing, but also find ways with Learfield to get third-party NIL deals, which is a big part of this. And it goes back to last year. Like one thing that we talked about is like what happens with these collectives, and that this is where this is all still like trying to be figured out with the CSC and the revenue sharing, like Deloitte and the clearinghouse and all this, of just like me having a collective and saying, hey, Fernando Mendoza, here's $17 million to come to my school. That's not NIL, right? Like you're just giving someone money. But like, how do you necessarily police that? How do you enforce that? Nobody knows. I think that's why Ohio State is trying to, like, I would imagine if Raising Cane's has a big deal with Ohio State through like the Learfield sponsorship stuff and a player benefits from NIL, you're going to see that guy in commercials. Like that's the goal here, right? It's like Jeremiah Smith is on a billboard. He's doing commercials for Red Bull. That's why Red Bull is paying him a crap ton of money. It doesn't make a lot of sense when it's like, I am going to pay you and you are going to do nothing except play for my favorite football team. That's what we're like trying to eliminate in theory in college football. Spoiler, it's very hard to enforce and it's not working. And it's just lawsuit after lawsuit.
So you mean when Cam Coleman commits to Alabama and then all of a sudden he's flipping to Texas because they offered him more money? That's not what this was supposed to be. I thought the CSC was supposed to. So what? A whole freaking thing over the summer about these things, and none of those things went into place. You're right. The patch is probably gonna be like the Nanos or Safe Flight or something like that. It's not gonna be Geico. So what if I don't want to buy a jersey with the Safe Flight patch on it? Am I going to be? And I'm asking questions that, to your point, they're going to vote on this week. So some of this is not set in stone yet, because like LSU also had the idea to have the jersey patches too. So this is not just an Ohio State thing. What if I don't want the patch on my jersey that I buy at Kroger?
I feel like that probably won't be an issue.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I haven't bought an NBA jersey in a minute because the Bulls don't have a player worth buying a jersey for. But I don't, like, if I go on NBA Shop right now, I don't think the jerseys come with the patches on it.
Okay. That's just I'm just thinking of questions that like a fan would ask, because we're journalists. Well, obviously, I'm going to ask you like the most journalism question in the world. But like sometimes people just want to know: do I have to have a stupid patch on my jersey if I want to buy a JJ jersey? Because if no, then like whatever, I don't care. Why? Like, is this a good? Is this a good thing? Because I think that's the thing. Fans see it and they are like freaking out about the jersey patch. Sure, we're being facetious about that, but just all of this. Like, why should fans care about this? Is this a good thing for Ohio State? This deal that, as you mentioned, it's a 3-year extension, so it was already in place through 2033, and now it's just going to run through 36. This is a good thing. This partnership with Learfield, where we went in there for the first time for the Texas game, and there was Learfield stuff all over the place. Some of the flooring was a little bit different. The scoreboard was a little bit different. I'm sure if you go to other sporting events, you'll see Learfield stuff. This is a good thing long term for the next time Ohio State has to get into a negotiation with the next Chris Henry Jr. in the recruiting space, or the next Will Howard in the transfer portal, or the next Bo Jackson situation. This is good that they are getting into a situation where there's going to be more money in the pot for Ohio State to deal with in terms of trying to put together a roster that can go compete for championships.
Yes. Yeah. Because you're in theory getting more revenue. You're getting more money in a way that directly includes NIL as well. We saw this last week when Brendan Sorsby was kind of going through his transfer portal recruitment, and LSU, went after him. And Ross Dellinger did a great job reporting like kind of some of the details of what LSU offered Sorsby. I think it was like north of $3 million. And a lot of that money, some of it was going to come from the school in terms of the revenue share, but a lot of it was going to come through. They don't work with Learfield. I can't remember what the company's name now is, but it's the same, same multimedia type thing. Yeah. Where they were going like through those NIL routes, those sponsorships were going to help fund, the $3 million that was going to go toward Brendan Sorsby contract for the year. Right. So this, and I think it makes sense because the company that's selling a ton of sponsorship for you, that makes a lot of sense of like, why not have them get our players sponsorships too, an NIL deal. So I think there's some logic to it of just like you're having it under an umbrella and it's all in one place, makes life a little bit simpler. So yeah, I think it's good from that sense. I think it's also good from, you're doing it percentage based now and not fixed amount. It's, for lack of a better term, you're kind of telling Learfield like, hey, get off your ass. Like you can sell more and you're going to make more money, and it's also going to make me more money. So I think that's also good for Ohio State. Is you never want a company, and I'm not saying like Learfield is, not doing anything and they're just kind of sitting on their hands, but it's like, I don't know, you're looking at them being like, hey, do more. And now there's an incentive for them to do more. Whereas before it's like, I don't know, you get to that fixed amount. It's like, okay, I did my job. So I think overall this is good for Ohio State and, where things stand in the NIL realm.
Do we think Ohio State is playing it safe because they're trying to not break rules that don't exist?
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Okay. I guess we can do a whole separate hour-and-a-half pod about that idea. I'm not going to ask you to do that right now. Does Ohio State need to go find a billionaire who just wants to give them money? That's my last flippant question.
It doesn't hurt, but I still think you can win in college football without, having a billionaire kind of funding everything. I think you can be all right.
Okay. I know it sounds like I'm asking just flippant questions and being reckless here. I think we've passed the nuance of trying to have a nuance where it's like we talk around the issue. I think sometimes it's okay to just ask just straight up what I think a fan is probably asking right now. Is like, hey, is Ohio State going 45 miles per hour when it feels like the rest of the country is going 95 and the speed limit is 65. Is Ohio State short on funds? Which I don't think either of us think that, but these are the things people want to know. So I'm just asking all of those different questions because I understand if after the first week of the portal, you're a little nervous about what's going on. When it feels like you're losing players, it feels like you're losing them because you don't want to pay them or you can't pay them. But then also you didn't get Chaz Coleman. You're probably not going to get Corey Perry. Ohio State is one of those places where the fan base thinks every good football player should come play here. Right. And they're not alone in that thinking. Alabama fans think that. Florida State fans think that. USC fans probably think that. Oregon fans at this point probably think that. And if you don't get the good player, you're wondering why the heck didn't you get the good player? Who didn't do their job? Who didn't have the funds? If you had the funds and didn't give it to them, why didn't you give him the funds? But then also, why'd you lose your 5-star third-string cornerback? None of those things should ever happen. So you are saying this is a good thing because this is reality. Ohio State has to pay its players, and they have to find ways to do so. Are there rules? Yes. Are there direct, like, legit rules? I don't know. We keep saying they are, and then we change the I don't know. We'll get to June this year, and then we'll be talking to Ross Bjork during a day camp because the NCAA or Congress or whoever else has passed something else new that is supposed to enforce some of these rules that may or may not be actually being applied right now. But you are saying overall, here's the reality. If you want to compete to win a national championship, you got to spend money and invest in it. A lot of money and a lot of investment in it, which means you got to find ways to do it in this world where for hundreds of years, you didn't have to find new ways to do it. Deals like this are going to help do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it means sacrificing the comfort of what you've known college sports to be a little bit. Okay. Can we get back to football, please? What if we just added 14 extra games just so we didn't have to talk about this more often?
How nice was like Thursday night, the like 3.5 hour break where it's like
it was great
watching Ole Miss go against Miami.
It was great.
I mean, maybe not for Ohio State fans, I guess, not the most enjoyable thing. Watching that and being like, we could have beat this Miami team and we would have beat this Ole Miss team. But I get it. Or like, Friday night, after spending another 24 hours talking about the portal, you sit down, you watch Indiana play Oregon. And then Saturday, after watching a bunch of portal stuff happen, you sit down and you watch Bears, Packers, and Panthers, Rams. And Sunday you wake up, you're like, oh, Ohio State got a guy from the portal. Nice. Okay, now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch the Bills and Jaguars and the 49ers and the Eagles and the Patriots and the Chargers. I enjoy watching the football. I enjoy watching the football. And it was a pretty good, I'm an Indiana alum and I root for the Chicago Bears. So like, I understand my weekend of football was maybe more fun than the average person's weekend of football. But like, that was a fun weekend of watching football. It's nice sometimes watching football and being like, the sport is still good. Everything around it, especially at the collegiate level, is a little bit of chaos, a little bit being an understatement, but the sport is still in a good spot. And I think Ohio State is firmly in that mix of programs that's going to be part of making the sport or continuing to make the sport really enjoyable, really fun, and a good product.
I just think for multiple decades now, this sport needed massive overhaul. The problem was we didn't do gradual, massive overhaul. Mm-hmm. We just did everything in like one small window. And now you're trying to plug up leaks. And plug up leaks and plugs up leaks. And because it wasn't gradual, I don't think you got to wrap your heads around it. But also, we cover a team who was always going to be the last to feel the effects of the I mean, it's just like real life, right? The more money you have, the longer you can put off feeling the effects of a economic shift. This is an economic shift in college sports, both literally and figuratively. This is an economic shift in college football. And the people who have been on the haves for the longest amount of time, which is i.e. the blue bloods, the healthy blue bloods especially, and Ohio State's the healthiest of healthy blue bloods, got to put this off, having to re-recruit your roster in terms of guys who actually impacted your 2 deep more than anybody else. So the last thing I had on here, Stefan, was like, how should Ohio State football fans feel about the direction of the program with Ryan Day as the head coach and Ross Bjork as the athletic director? I think right now you should find comfort in the fact that they do have a plan.
Yeah.
They're not running around with their heads cut off. But just like anything in life, right? You call a play and it's, okay, did the play work? Then it was a successful play and it was a smart and genius play. It's like going for it on 4th down. If you go for it on 4th down and you get it, you're a genius. If you don't go for it, if you go for it on 4th down and you don't get it, you're an idiot. Right? It just depends on how it works or not. So, I think what we did essentially is we had 2 different parts of this pod. One part of the pod was like, here's what Ryan Day and Ohio State football is doing. And that's where, I was talking a little bit more. And then we had here's what Ross Bjork and Ohio State athletic department is doing. And that's where I shut up and let Stefan talk.
I do think you're right, though. I think they have a plan. And I still don't know if we have an answer as to whether that's the right plan or not. Right? It's pretty clear that they are more within a structure than some other programs that are saying, you can't enforce this, I'm going to do what I want. And I think in the long term, Ohio State's approach will probably be right. We'll see how the CSC starts enforcing some stuff. And listen, I think the irritating part about this is like, you would like to know if Ohio State's right or wrong right now. And it might take a while. At some point, you have to imagine college football will have some guardrails in place. There will be a way to enforce, like, the sport can function like this. Like,
no,
donors can only give money for so long, right? Because they're not getting money back from these universities. Like, if I'm paying for Julian Payne, it's not a business transaction where I'm getting something in return, right? Like, it's like,
if you're an owner,
for my favorite team.
Yeah, like if you're the owner of the Chiefs, you paid Patrick Mahomes all that money, but there's like a financial recoup from that of like the type of the ticket prices, just the fan, everything that comes back to you, and you gave him a small piece of the pie. You're not giving Julian Sand a small piece of a pie. You're just kind of giving Julian Sand a pie.
And pie's really good, but
it's good.
There's only, the chef can only keep making pies for so long.
Yeah, there's only so many eggs, man. At some point, you run out of eggs to make the pie. Yeah, there is a plan. There's a plan in place, and I guess we'll be here next year. I mean, we did the season reviews of the position groups. Maybe we should be doing a season review of just like Ohio State's athletic department and just like the state of everything next year and whether it worked, right? Because, listen, we can sit here right now and say, oh, okay, Earl Little's a great addition. Devin McEwen's a great addition. If Devin McEwen has 27 catches for 300 yards next year and Ohio State's receiver play is still a problem, we're going to go, that was a bad move. If he has 850 yards and 55 catches and 5 touchdowns and Ohio State wins a national championship, we're gonna go, man, good find by Cortez Hankton and Ryan Day. I'm going to get this guy, right? If I don't know if this new deal with Learfield leads to it never feels like Ohio State lost a bidding war because they couldn't bid more. It's just because they walked away. Then he's a genius for this, right? But if he gave Jimbo Fisher all that money. If Jimbo Fisher had turned Texas A&M to what he turned Florida State into, nobody would be questioning whether or not Ross Bjork made the right decision with Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher didn't do that. And I think that impacts it. That's his Ethan Inyawa. Is you got to remember, that was the AD who gave Jimbo Fisher all that money. That was also the AD that was there when Texas A&M had that recruiting class that they paid for. And then it blew up in their face. If those things don't happen, maybe he isn't approaching things the way he's approaching things here at Ohio State. Maybe he is a little bit more reckless and aggressive for how they go about things. So it's that's what it is. If you have concerns, understand there is a plan. And now for the next 365 days, we are going to watch and see if this plan works. Because if it works, best case scenario, Ohio State's winning another national championship. Worst case scenario is like, I don't know, they just lose a football game in the semifinal or something like that. If it doesn't work, best case scenario, they lose a home game in the playoff. Worst case scenario, now we have to have conversations about whether or not these two are the answer at Ohio State. But let's see what happens.
I think the best way to sum up everything we just talked about is you can go buy a jersey without the patch on it, but you're better off buying jerseys of former players than current players because that is a risk that you might not want to take.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
Jeremiah Smith and Julian Sand maybe being the exception.
Even then, I might just say Jeremiah Smith. I would say, just to add, you can't get attached to players anymore. And it's a rough thing to hear, but
it sucks. But
it sucks because that's kind of the point here is you're getting attached to play. The NFL is where you get attached to the logo. Here, it's about the logo and the players, and that's not true anymore because, Bo Jackson almost left after 1 year. Fahim Delane is gone after 1 year. Quincy Porter is gone for 1 year. So all that emotional capital you spent investing in those guys as recruits, you probably now feel like it was for nothing. And you're right to think that. So until a player's career is over, and even then, like Caleb Downs in his announcement, there were pictures of him at Alabama in that announcement. So there's that. 315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. The portal is still open until Friday. So as guys go in, we'll let you know. As Ohio State lands guys, we'll let you know. As guys are visiting Ohio State, we'll try our best to let you know as things are happening. Spring practice will start at some point. The sun will come up. Things will be okay.
Spring practice will be very interesting. Get the text because there's going to be a lot of new faces.
Yeah, we're just going to be
guys in new roles.
Oh my Lord, it's just going to be. Who is? Oh yeah, it's that guy. Wait, where's Fahim? Oh, yeah, he doesn't go here anymore. I think no news is good news in terms of Matt Patricia. Probably right now.
For now, yeah.
Like I know,
there's a lot of. I'm curious to see. There's a lot of head coach openings that are getting filled, and then we'll see maybe some assistant jobs from calling. I think the only one I've firmly seen reported was the Cowboys having some interest in him because they just fired Eberflus as defensive coordinator. But I'm sure
you would know that.
What's up?
Of course you would know that.
Yeah, Eberflus sucks. But it's I don't know, the Browns could hire a coach and then he needs a defensive coordinator and there's Matt Patricia down the street. So.
Yeah, because the NFL carousel opened last Monday too, so that's what's insane about all this is all this stuff is but again that's structured. This is not happening. It is happening in the middle of the playoff, but it's more happening for teams who are not in the playoff and not everybody.
I don't think the Niners are going into the divisional round thinking, no, what if the Ravens poach our coach and we don't have a coach for the NFC Championship game?
Yeah. No, it's literally like I'm watching the Patriots and the Chargers that started. If Mike Vrabel had already decided he was leaving for the Dolphins and they were in the Patriots, just like,
it sounds kind of crazy when you talk about a normal league. Like, it's like, wow, that would not work in the NFL. Well, apparently it's what happens in college football.
The Ole Miss thing was just so fascinating because every single game they were making it through, you were hearing reports of Lane Kiffin is no longer allowing this coach to coach at Ole Miss to finish out the run. It's like, dude, they're about to win a national championship. What are you talking about? He's just like, okay, you can stay through. It's almost as if he thought they would lose earlier. Yeah. I think he thought that they were going to lose 100%. Georgia. And so this wasn't going to be a problem. And then they beat Georgia, and it now became – because, I mean, he probably knew they were going to beat Tulane, with all due respect to Tulane. I thought Tulane put up a better fight in the second half, but they probably knew once they got the G5 draw, they were going to win that game. I think he thought they were going to lose to Georgia.
I guess he didn't know the bracket wasn't out when he left, but
no, I'm saying once he realized what the bracket was, it's like, okay, yeah, you guys can stick around for the Tulane game, it's a home game, whatever, and then like you'll lose to Georgia, and that'll be that. When they beat Georgia, it became a shoot. I don't know. You can't stay anymore. I'm trying to build my program. But I'll do 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Stefan and I just tried to lay everything out for you as simply as we could about what's going on, what's an issue, what's not, and how you should feel about things and why you should feel that way about things. Gillis and I on Tuesday are going to do that from the recruiting side of things, of just as we see Ohio State's last 2 recruiting classes being gutted, and none of these guys have been here longer than 24 months. Like, how does that impact the way Ohio State might approach things in the recruiting space going forward? That'll be Tuesday. And then after you have consumed all that information, it's going to be your turn to talk and kind of exhale a little bit and let us know how you are feeling about things with a little rants pod. And then I'll figure out what we're doing Thursday and Friday. Let's see how many other people go in the portal first. Because trying to project longer than 72 hours is just not worth it anymore. You hang your hat on a guy, and then all of a sudden he's in the portal, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's great. We used to do this thing where we would project the starting lineup 2 years out every year. It's not even, I couldn't even project who's going to be the starters against Northwestern anymore, let alone 2 years from now. 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan Krajisnik, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.